before we start, I just want to, Roger, come over here. I know I've introduced him once before, but I just want to talk about my friend Roger Naught, who works for RC Services. We don't have anything up there, but, and everybody knows, hopefully everybody knows Roger. He's been a mainstay here at Themis for quite a long time, and probably for many of you, started well before Themis existed, and he's been a friend of Themis for such a long time. And his, do we call him a partner? Is it John? How do we describe John? Partner. Okay, John. Many of you also know John Fleming, who's also been another mainstay and a foundation for Themis. And the two, John and Roger, were kind enough to help us out when we needed a little help financially for supporting the keynote speaker here, because we had lost the sponsor from last year, and so we needed a new one. And these guys stepped up, and I just can't thank Roger enough for that. And so we're calling him the keynote speaker sponsor. And we thank RC Services, and look them up, put them, make sure you use them. Anything you'd like to say, Raj?
I just want to say thanks everybody for coming. Really appreciate you guys. I've worked with most of you guys throughout the years, and I consider you guys family. So anything I could ever do at any time, just give me a buzz.
Thanks, Raj. Appreciate it, man. I'd like to introduce Themis member Gary Lovell from Carla Copeland in South Carolina and Atlanta, and he's going to introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks, Mitch. I'm just going to stand by the podium, which is not what I normally do. I want to thank everybody for coming out. I'm Gary Lovell with Copeland, Stair, Valls, and Lovell. We're in Atlanta, Charleston, and Chattanooga. I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker today. I have appeared before our speaker on many occasions. I've also appeared before his daughter, who is a circuit court judge in South Carolina. Our keynote speaker is a native of South Carolina. He was born in Williamsburg County. He attended the Williamsburg County Training School, for the equivalent of what we would call high school these days, where he was the valedictorian. After he completed high school, he went to Cleveland State University in the fine state of Ohio, where he was the president of the student government and served on many prestigious committees and presentation areas in that university. After completing his education there, he went on to law school at the Cleveland Marshall School of Law, also in Ohio. After completing law school, he went into private practice for about 6 years in Ohio. And then I guess he decided he had had enough of the snow, so he returned to the great state of South Carolina in about 1982. In 1982, he worked in private practice as a solicitor for Williamsburg County. He also went into private practice, did that for quite a few years, tried a lot of good cases. But in 2000, the legislature of South Carolina decided they would appoint our keynote speaker to the circuit court of South Carolina. He was a circuit court judge beginning in the year 2000 all the way up until his retirement in December of last year. He's presided over so many cases that were of honor and of keynote that you would be here for hours and hours if I went through a few, but a couple I'll just mention. He presided over a case a few years back of a police officer, Michael Slager, who was accused of shooting and killing a civilian, Mr. Scott, and it was a very highly charged case. And one thing our keynote speaker did then and has continued to do was he kept the peace. He kept it on a low energy level. He kept the emotion out of it, and he was to be commended for that. He also was recently the judge that presided over what we call a fake Uber case, where a young lady got into a vehicle she thought was an Uber, but it really wasn't, and ultimately was killed by that. He, again, presided over a case that had a lot of publicity in our area and kept the cool of the community. We all know the other case that he's been involved in recently. That is the one in Hampton County, South Carolina, Colleton County, involving a notoriously talented and good lawyer who came from a long line of lawyers, Alec Murdaugh, who was accused of killing his wife and son and embezzling client funds. Judge, our keynote speaker, presided over that case. You all probably saw it on TV. I was actually in Europe watching it at one point. But he did, once again, in that case, what he's done in all cases that he's presided in. He used his patience and his knowledge to keep everything on a calm, unemotional basis so that justice could be done in a case that got worldwide press. But setting aside the cases like that, there are a couple other things about Judge Newman that you should know. He comes from a family with a history of public service. He is a charter member of the I. DeQuincy Newman United Methodist Church. He also has many family members who have set precedent that has benefited all of the people in South Carolina and even in the country. In 1968, the United States Supreme Court case of Newman versus Piggy Park Enterprises was brought by his aunt, Annie Newman, and that case paved the way for the filing of civil rights discrimination suits by requiring the losing party to pay attorney's fees. His uncle, the late Reverend Dr. Isaiah DeQuincy Newman, was the first African American elected to the South Carolina State Senate since Reconstruction. And as I mentioned earlier, in 2016, his daughter, Jocelyn Newman, was elected to the circuit court bench, which at the time made both Judge Newman and Judge Newman, his daughter, the first daughter-father judges to be serving as circuit court judges in the history of the state of South Carolina. So our keynote speaker is here to enlighten us on the justice system from his many, many years of experience and knowledge as one of the preeminent trial judges in the South Carolina. I want to thank RC Services for allowing him to be here with us today, and I want to tell everyone it is my honor to introduce to you our keynote speaker, the Honorable Clifton Newman.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Thank you very much, and good afternoon. Good afternoon. Okay. It is truly, it's been a pleasure to be here. I came in yesterday, Pat and I, to kind of get a feel for the people that we would be around for the next few days and to get a sense of the lay of the land, so to speak, and it has been truly amazing, truly wonderful. I've met a lot of people who I didn't know, and I've renewed a lot of friendships here. I've been a judge now for 23 and a half years, retired December 31st. Prior to that, a lawyer for 24 years in Ohio and in South Carolina. Have handled cases as a defense attorney, as a plaintiff's attorney, as a prosecutor, as a judge, as an associate justice on the Supreme Court, as a special referee appointed by the Supreme Court. So I have been around the block, and along the way I have dealt with many of you directly, and especially those of you in the insurance industry indirectly. So it's good to come to this moment in time and to share some time with you all. Now they told me the clicker was here. Where is it? They said the clicker was there. Here, Lindsay is coming forward with it. That's the clicker, huh? Okay, they told me it was here. Okay. And along the way, I've just been involved in any number of cases of public interest. And my primary goal throughout all of those cases was to ensure that justice is done and to ask myself, what does justice require in a particular case, or in fact in a particular situation. Now, Most of you know about this case, and the lawyers now involved in this case, and the lawyers perhaps Mr. Murdaugh, who was involved in this case, but many of you know him through your work as defense attorneys and insurance folks, along with defense attorney Dick Harpootlian, who also serves as a state senator. His wife is an ambassador to Slovenia, and now Creighton Waters, the prosecutor, and Jim Griffin. But before talking about that case, I'd like to talk about how we got to that case, at least how I got to that case. One of the longest running cases that I've been involved in is the case of the estate of James Brown, the godfather of soul, the hardest working man in show business. He passed on Christmas Day in 2006, and his estate is still going on. Lawsuits by lawyers, against insurance companies, by the insurance companies, etc. And just this past week, I received a motion for sanctions against a lawyer involved in the case. So as I retired, I was ready to move on, just to, rid myself of Alex Murdaugh and others, including the estate of James Brown. But they won't let me go. So James Brown, hit it, Mr. You get the picture. They don't want me to go, and I haven't been able to go. Beyond a civil case like the estate of James Brown, I've dealt with many criminal cases. This one of note is the estate of Michael Motti. Michael Motti was sent to prison in Virginia at the age of 17. And he said that the last thing he would do in his life, he told the sheriff of this, is that he wanted to kill a police officer. He was released from prison 3 years later at age 20 and stole a car, stole some guns, and headed south on Interstate 95, ventured off into North Carolina through Raleigh, and shot and killed a gas station attendant, robbed the store, made it to South Carolina, carjacked a car, attempted to use stolen credit cards, and when the credit cards wouldn't work, he ran off into the woods. He landed at the home of a cabin belonging to a police captain in Orangeburg. The captain was away with his family, his wife, celebrating his wife's birthday, and prior to retiring for the evening, he dropped off his family and stopped by his cabin to check on things, and he was surprised there by Michael Motti, who was hiding out in his cabin. Motti took the officer's gun that was stored in the cabin and shot him 9 times. And set his body on fire and stole his vehicle that he drove up there in and headed down Interstate 95 and landed here in Florida, Sunrise, Florida, where he was cornered and captured. He was brought to trial before me, facing the death penalty. And while awaiting trial, he attempted to escape several times and almost made it out a couple of times. And in the middle of the trial during jury selections, he was found with a key that he had would unlock his handcuffs, and they caught him, thankfully, before we started court that morning. He decided to plead guilty. And in South Carolina, when a defendant in a capital murder case pleads guilty when he's facing the death penalty, the sentence, the responsibility of sentencing is on the judge. And at the time, I opposed capital punishment. United Methodists, we opposed capital punishment. I opposed capital punishment. But here we have this guy who attempted to escape, killed people along the way, promised to kill a police officer, and succeeded in killing the police captain. Even though I had my personal views about it, the case became much larger than me. And I had to ask my question, what does justice demand? And in that case, justice demanded that Mighty get the death penalty. And I sentenced him to death at the age of 23. He's the youngest person sentenced to death row at the time in the state of South Carolina. Now, 18 years later, he is still on death row. But the question, what does justice deserve, is something that has resonated with me throughout my career. After Mighty, another police shooting case came about in Aiken, in the area of South Carolina, right across the border is Augusta, where the Masters is played. Stephon Carter was 18 years old. He was working at Wendy's, and he ended up in a car, and the police suspected or got a call of a drive-by shooting, and they pulled into a parking lot. Stephon Carter is in the car, seated in the back seat. The officer says, "Get out the car." He gets out the car with his hands in his pocket. "Take your hands out your pocket." He took his hand out of his pocket, came out shooting, shot and killed the police officer in Aiken. That case was a death penalty case. And at age 17, all the wrangling back and forth, he was clearly and obviously guilty. And in that case, during jury selection, he pled guilty to a negotiated sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. And I had to give his sentence, impose his sentence. And in looking into what his sentence should be or whether I should follow the negotiations, I discovered during the course of the trial many things, and they're talking with me. Of course, that's a younger Clifton Newman right there. I guess 2010, I think it was, or 12. So, and then, of course, there's a picture of a guy looking over my shoulder there, the portrait against the wall. He was a former circuit court judge elected in 1938 and ended up running for president of the United States. Was elected governor in South Carolina on a write-in, as a write-in candidate, and was the longest serving senator in the history of the country until surpassed by Robert Byrd of West Virginia. Who knows that guy? Strom Thurmond. Yes, and the prosecutor in the case that I'm referring to, Carter's case, was Strom Jr., Strom's son. He's not in that picture, but he was in charge of the prosecution. But during the sentencing of Stephon Carter, I discovered that Stephon Carter's father was doing life in prison for killing his mother. And sad situation, he really didn't have a chance. And it's just striking, the two of them now spending their time together serving life. 2 cases of police officers being killed. Next, I got State versus Michael Slager. And the twist in this one is the police officer is now doing the killing. This case came about during a time in the country where there was just a surge of killing of black men by police officers, and none of whom were convicted or had been convicted of the crime. And in this case, Michael Slager had a trial, and there was no conviction there either. The evidence in the case was that Slager, on an early one Saturday morning, stopped Walter Scott. His taillight was out on his car, and Walter Scott had an outstanding outstanding arrest warrant for child support. Didn't want to go to jail, so he took off running. And while running away, he was shot 6 times in the back by Slager. I denied Slager bond. He was in jail. Coming up to Christmas time, of course, I was applauded at the time for denying him bond. No way a police officer charged with murder should get bond. Then right before Christmas, I said, well, he has no prior criminal record. His wife's pregnant, a baby on the way. I gave him a bond. So rather than being applauded, then I was, called everything. How could you possibly give this man a bond? But his trial came up, and that depicts Slager planting his taser on the body of Walter Scott, and claiming that they were struggling over the gun and all. But a passerby who was walking on his way to work captured this scene on his cell phone video. And that cell phone video resulted in Slager being charged with murder, and then he had to come up with some other kind of defense. But it also came up during the time, because a month later, Dylan Roof went into a church in Charleston and shot and killed 9 people, and that became known as the Emmanuel 9. So we had a lot of tension going on in Charleston at the time, with Dylan Roof facing trial across the street in federal court. I'm trying Slager in state court. Charleston is pretty diverse, at 35% African American population, and I required all jurors to be served individually to ensure that a maximum cross-section of the population would be called to service on jury duty. 35% of the jurors who appeared were African American. And despite that, and we went through jury selection, there ended up being 1 African American selected on the jury. And so we went through the trial. I issued a media order. That was my first involvement in issuing media orders. Charleston has a public information office, unlike some of the smaller counties. Very tense trial in Lovell Gary's local courtroom there in Charleston County. Very talented lawyers on both sides. Andy Savage in the white hair represented Mr. Slager, and that's Slager next to him. And Andy argued to the jury, do not let this judge sentence my guy to prison. So I'm sitting there as a judge, and he says, "Do not let this man sentence my guy to prison." Now, he could have been upset because out of all the jurors who had been selected, all the black jurors were eliminated except for one. And so I concluded, given a history of lack of conviction, even despite clear evidence, I concluded that if there was to be a not guilty verdict, that one black guy that they selected would have to sign that verdict form. So I made that one guy the foreperson of the jury. And it ended up being a hung jury. So we set it up to let them do the Dillon Roof trial, and we'd proceed with the retrial. Slager decided that he'd carry out on not letting this guy sentence him to prison. So he pled guilty in federal court and got a 20-year prison sentence that he's doing time on now. Next, and I went to the session this morning, protecting the brand session featuring the counsel for Uber from San Francisco, or no, she wasn't from San Francisco. You're from Chicago, not San Francisco. And but that case became known as the fake Uber trial. The young lady, Samantha Josephson from New Jersey, came to South Carolina, was in college. And 3 weeks before graduation, she had been accepted to Drexel Law School and was applying to some other law schools in the Northeast. And she said, "I'm settling on Drexel." And during the weekend, she goes out to celebrate with her girlfriends, decided she wanted to go home early. She called Uber, and a car rolled up, and she got in the back seat of the car thinking that she had gotten into an Uber, but she was being kidnapped. She obviously attempted to get out of the back seat of that car, but it had children's locks, the child locks and restraints. Couldn't open the door. She was locked in. She attempted to kick the window out, various things, and the defendant, Nathaniel Rowland up there, started stabbing her and stabbed her for over 120 times. He was arrested the following day, driving the car that was full of Samantha's blood. He attempted to use her credit card, which was caught on at the ATM, caught on camera, attempted to sell her cell phone, and once again, here's a cell phone. Guy was able to track the ownership of it as not being Rowland's, but being Samantha's. And that case came on for a murder trial a couple of years ago in Columbia. He was found guilty, and is that all right, hit it.
If it please the court, Your Honor, if you would hear from Nathaniel Rowland's mother first.
Okay. This is sentencing of
Thank you, Your Honor.
Nathaniel Rowland.
The state have accused our son of a crime that he didn't commit. You
Ma'am,
know,
I'm not going to hear
all right,
any
but-
claim of innocence. Advance it to the next. He's been convicted by the jury. Okay, started there. That the child that they raised could do such a heinous thing, could commit such a murder. And I have dealt with the heartless, and you fall into that category. A person without any remorse whatsoever. A person who is totally emotionless, and in the law we call it a depraved heart. And it would be absolutely astonishing, amazing to me, for the truth to be that you have engaged in this activity all of a sudden, that there are not signs that your family can point to, that your friends can point to, where if some intervention had taken place, this young lady would have been protected. His mother was wanting to tell me that her son could never do such a thing, that he, because of the way she raised him, and I had to cut her off. The jury found him guilty. She did not testify. The evidence was 150% overwhelming concerning his guilt. And again, what did justice require? It required me to sentence him to life in prison. And the previous picture I should go back to, his family is there suffering, and they came down from New Jersey for the proceedings. They sent their child down to South Carolina for college. She's about to graduate, and here she's brutally killed by Roland. And it's just almost unbearable to observe them in their suffering through that trial. One good thing came from the trial is that 3 years later, Congress took up this question of rideshare safety and what could or should be done, and legislation was introduced, and the legislation passed, and President Biden signed into law Sammy's Law, which requires rideshare companies to have some kind of identifying means for the public to know. I mean, how many of you have, up to that point, perhaps called in an Uber and trusted that the person that pulled up, so anxious to get your ride that you go and you're ready to jump in, and unfortunately for Samantha, she jumped in the wrong car. But now there's protection because of the various developments in technology and just improved organizational structure by the rideshare companies. And so that's one law that came as a result of Samantha's unfortunate death. And many of you came because of this case, Alex Murdaugh. And all my years on the bench, the first time a case came to me where it involved someone who I knew. I actually knew Alex Murdaugh. I knew his father, who was a prosecutor, head prosecutor in the area, Hilton Head area of South Carolina. I knew his grandfather, who was the lead prosecutor in the area, that area of the state. I didn't know his great-grandfather, but his great-grandfather, too, was the lead head prosecutor in that area of the state. And it's a 5-county area. And not only were they prosecutors, but they also had the largest, perhaps most successful law firm in that part of the state, because they could prosecute and they could also represent. So very skilled lawyers, very powerful law firm. So powerful that for many of you in the insurance industry, you write about their feats as being the cause of Hampton County in South Carolina being called a judicial hellhole due to the big verdicts that came out of that firm in large measure by the Murdaugh law firm. So I knew Alex casually, not intimately, casually, as did most judges in South Carolina, as did most lawyers in South Carolina. And the current prosecutor recused himself. The several judges recused themselves, and the Supreme Court appointed me to handle all the matters involving Alec Murdaugh. A special order signed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court in September of 2021. September 2021 is when I was put in charge of Alex Murdaugh's case and given concurrent jurisdiction throughout the state to handle all matters involving, criminal matters involving Alex and his co-defendants, with Alex being charged with 99 criminal offenses in addition to murdering his wife and son. Also, several other crimes that also included charges against lawyers and bankers and various other folks, and I was put in charge of all of those cases. Of course, when that happened, then the questions abound. Well, there's just too much corruption. The integrity of the judicial system was on trial. There was a settlement done where monies ended up being missing. Questions were being raised about why is it that all this can happen in a state and in a judicial system, and how is it that it had gone unchecked for so long. So the question was raised, and they're posted there, don't forget about the judges and the complicity of the judges in this. Will there be more good old boy system, backroom dealing? We need judicial transparency. We need to know what's going on. Will leniency infect this case? Will he ever be brought to justice in this case? And the responsibility of dealing with the case fell on my shoulders as the presiding judge. So Alex was in a drug treatment center by this time, and then the news broke that, well, the news didn't break already. I had been supervising the case, and I'd signed over 100 search warrants et al., including the Google fencing that was mentioned earlier, and all tracking the movement of his vehicle, getting things off his refrigerator, just the amazing technology was all in play in this case. But Alex was released from drug treatment, and he wanted to go from drug treatment in Atlanta to drug treatment up north somewhere, but I decided to revoke his bond. Said that he was a danger to himself as well as to the community. So he appeared before me there. Obviously he was dejected as he appeared back before me again. And yet again, those are 3 different courtrooms in 3 different counties. And this is when he was there to be indicted for the murder of his wife and child. Once again, there was a lot of media frenzy involving it, and I had to sign orders sealing or orders regarding extrajudicial statements. Both the state and the defense requested that I issue a gag order prohibiting anyone from talking about the case. There had been a lot of media leaks, and we couldn't figure out where are these leaks coming from. He hadn't been indicted, so are the leaks coming from the state's attorney's office? Are the leaks coming from the law enforcement? Are the leaks coming from the defense attorneys? Are the leaks coming from the prosecutors? But as soon as I signed an order, and before it could hit the being filed in court, there's a news article about what had happened. So leaks were coming from someplace, and so the issue became, should I sign a gag order? Quoted this portion of the canons of ethics that in South Carolina appellate rules, which imposes a special responsibility on the lawyers for the state, special responsibilities on the prosecutor, but also responsibilities on lawyers and other people working in law enforcement, including the defense attorneys, to comply with the rules of professional conduct. And I rejected their motion for a gag order, citing that the public had a right to know what was going on in this case, and there was to be complete transparency, and the First Amendment freedom of the press rights of the media would be fully protected. And so the doors of the courtroom opened, and certainly we had a lot of people waiting to come in. Crowds would form at the Colleton County Courthouse like 5 a.m. in the morning, right as the courtroom had 200 and something seats, and everybody wanted to get in to view it. I signed an order regarding media coverage. It gave Court TV the right to do the pool coverage to the trial. They wanted to be able to sell licensing rights to other media outlets to use the footage from the trial, and I rejected that, told them that if they wanted to provide pool coverage, they must provide footage to any and all media outlets without cost. And that resulted in that trial being played in every room, living room throughout the state and throughout the nation, and throughout the world, I guess, because there was no, they didn't have proprietary rights over what they were covering, the coverage. They had to make it available to everyone. Outline some press groups that would be given some priority. Of course, at the bottom you see Fox, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, but they all were given priority seating in the courtroom so that there could be coverage, and the smaller outfits up top, some of them even including some blogs and all media folks who were interested in the case, had a special interest in it. Set up a media room across the street, and they were all quite comfortable there, getting live feed from the courthouse so that they can send it out nationwide, worldwide. I appointed a media liaison, Jay Bender, who represented the media in South Carolina for years, respected by the media. And so I said, I can't not deal with this media, all these requests and being bothered all the time. So I appointed Jay to be in charge, and there Jay is talking to Alex lawyer, Dick Harpootlian. We had everyone around, protesters and all, people lobbying for their point of view. Cameras trying to get that shot of Alex coming in, going out, and that was the shot they were looking for every day to get him. Priority seating, many people would get the clerk of court's air to get in when others had to wait outside. We had just a gory scene involving autopsy photos and crime scene photos, which depicted the brutal slaying of the wife and child Maggie and Paul, and had to seal a lot of the evidence to protect the privacy interests of the family. Here I am making some kind of point to to John Metters, one of the defense attorney who I've known a long time as well. And there's my law clerk, Gabby, looking at admiringly at her judge. She's now moved on, and she's a prosecutor in Greenville, but she did a wonderful job as my law clerk during the trial. Now, during a break, I'm not sure what's on Alex's mind at that moment, but during the trial, jurors get worn out, and the audience just sitting. So every 30, 40 minutes, I just said, let's take a stretch break and just get up and kind of relieve the pressure, the tension, and people seemingly enjoy it, and Alex wasn't enjoying his moment, not then. I don't think, because he was on the witness stand during that break, and that's why he's standing so close to me. Alex weighed about 250 pounds before all of this came about, and you can just tell he's just a shell of a man as far as his body size then. And so Alex was found guilty. If you'll play that slide. That one, yeah. Before the court for sentencing. And he came before me for sentencing. I expected the defense lawyers to say something on his behalf, but they said they had nothing to say. This has been perhaps one of the most troubling cases, not just for me as a judge, for the state, for the defense team, but for all of the citizens in this community, all the citizens in this state, and as we have seen based on the media coverage throughout the nation. You have a wife who's been killed, murdered, a son savagely murdered. A lawyer, a person from a respected family who has controlled justice in this community for over a century. A person whose grandfather's portrait hang at the back of the courthouse that I had to have ordered removed in order to ensure that a fair trial was had by both the state and the defense. And I've sat through the trial. Not only have I sat through the trial, but also as the presiding judge of the state grand jury, sat through and participated in the issuance of search warrants of various sorts, bond hearings, and have had to consider many things. That's his son, son Buster. And we have this case, and I'm also assigned to preside over 99 others, at least 99 other cases. Though testimony has come up regarding many of those other cases, I will not make any comment with regard to any other pending matter, as I have been assigned those cases as well. It's also particularly troubling, Mr. Murdoch, because as a member of the legal community and a well-known member of the legal community, you've practiced law before me, and we've seen each other at various occasions throughout the years. And it was especially heartbreaking for me to see you go in the media from being a grieving father who lost a wife and a son to being the person indicted and convicted of killing them. And you've engaged in such duplicitous conduct here in the courtroom, here on the witness stand, and as established by the testimony throughout the time leading from the time of the indictment and prior to the indictment throughout the trial to this moment in time. Certainly, you have no obligation to say anything other than saying not guilty. And obviously, as appeals are probably expected or absolutely expected, I would not expect a confession of any kind. In fact, as I've presided over murder cases over the past 22 years, I have yet to find a defendant who could go there, who could go back to that moment in time when they decided to pull the trigger or to otherwise murder someone. I have not been able to get anyone, any defendant, even those who have confessed to being guilty, to go back and explain to me what happened at that moment in time when they opted to pull the trigger, when they opted to commit the most heinous crimes known to man. In this case, qualifies under our death penalty statute based on the statutory aggravating circumstances of 2 or more people being murdered by the defendant by one act or pursuant to one scheme or course of conduct. And of course, this goes on for a bit with me trying to get Alex to talk, trying to give him an opportunity to say something, to explain himself. His only explanation, again, was he's not guilty, that he didn't do it. And of course, I told him that it might not have been him. It might have been the demon inside of him, the demon he becomes, because he admitted to just using drugs, opioid pills. He indicated he was spending $50,000 a week on them. And of course, that's pretty hard to believe, but he obviously had a drug problem, and his son Paul had found drugs, and Maggie knew he had a drug problem, and but he would not. I couldn't get him to go there. He, of course, he's maintained his innocence, and his case is still on appeal. But I made it clear to him that in my view, the evidence was overwhelming that he's guilty. Initially, they filed for a notice of alibi saying that he was someplace else, he wasn't there, and they ended up having to retract that alibi in the middle of the trial. Neither side requested a change of venue, I think because of his family's influence, they perhaps thought that they had an advantage to try the case in that area, but that did not prove to be true. They wanted a crime scene visit, and I gave them a jury view, and most jurors after the trial said that that didn't work in his favor. And he decided to testify, and by all accounts, most people concluded that that was a disaster as well. So things didn't work in his favor at all during that trial, I sentenced him to life, a double life. And the headline went from the trial of the century, as it was called. Of course, people were calling me, telling me during out, be sure you're not like Judge Ito from the OJ case. So I'll be the opposite of Judge Ito. I won't say anything during the trial. I'll just maintain as low a profile as I can. I don't want to be the lead story on the evening news for anything I said or did during the trial. So I let the focus remain on the lawyers trying the case, and they tried the case, including Alex spending a long time on the witness stand. So I'm ready to hit the gavel and say sine die for that trial, which took place a year ago. Actually, we'd be about midway through that trial, because it happened during January, February, early March of last year. Then the questions came about, who is this guy? Who is Clifton Newman? How many of you all asked that question? Who is Judge Clifton Newman? A look behind the man who sentenced Alex to prison. And my years of experience on the bench brought me to that point, and had me once again asking the question, what does justice require? And that's what I sought to do during that trial. Most of the things I read was pretty positive. I got letters from all over the world commending me for doing a good job and helping to restore confidence in our judicial system. On another note, Gary Lovell mentioned my daughter. So among the things that people wanted was to have my daughter and I placed on the cover of the South Carolina Lawyers magazine. And my daughter Jocelyn is there with me. And we are the first and only father-daughter judicial team in the state of South Carolina, in the history of the state of South Carolina, serving at the same time. And that's something we're mighty proud of, that I'm mighty proud of, and Pat's mighty proud of as well. Thank you. And if any of you all have a case around Columbia, she's the chief administrative judge, and she does it a little differently than I do it. She's a member of Mensa, one of the highly intellectual group in the country, intellectuals. She does a great job, and she runs a pretty tight ship, doesn't she? Yeah, she does pretty good. So after the trial, I went back to Cleveland, and I'm glad to see a lot of Cleveland folks here. To Gerardo and the guy who presided at the Uber session, and there you go. Yeah. So I kind of rekindled some acquaintances with folks from Cleveland. So I graduated from Cleveland State and went back there, and they admitted me to the Cleveland State University Hall of Fame, and the dean wanted to interview me and wanted me to talk to the students and all, and I did that. And of course, at the time, I'm saying, well, that case is over. I can kind of move on. I'm retiring, let me move on, and thinking that he'd move on to his appeal, but my role would be over. But then news broke that the clerk of court who had published a book quickly, was accused of tampering with the jury. I said, oh boy, I thought I was through with this. And so the defense team, they had gotten a set of bad rulings from me throughout the trial, and voiced my opinion that their client's guilty of murder. And the defense lawyer said, we got to get rid of this judge. So they filed a writ of prohibition, first time I'd ever heard of that being filed. They filed that asking the Supreme Court to step in and withdraw my appointment as the judge over the case. And as that order that's highlighted says that I requested to be removed from all post-trial matters in the case, and the chief issued an order saying that. And I was relieved, actually. This case came about during a very difficult time of my life, of our lives, and I'd given it my best, and I thought I was done with it, only to be hear about this motion for a new trial filed 6 or 8 months after the jury verdict, and that's a new trend for all of you. You think your case is over, and then the next phase of it is an investigation of the jury, and then jurors move from being jurors to being defendants, basically, or to being accused of some type of misconduct, and that's the case here. Not only the jurors, but the clerk of court, who you trust as a court official to not, when the judge says, do not discuss this case with anyone, we assume that the clerk of court knows that they're included in the anyone who's not to talk with the jury about the case. So that's the question rose here in this case. But I stayed in charge of those other 99 charges that I was telling you about, and many of you all have been involved in some of that, one way or the other, because he pled guilty to stealing over $8 million from his clients, and among those 99 counts were charges of money laundering, breach of trust, criminal conspiracy, computer crimes, and all, and almost all of it involved insurance of some sort, some type of insurance coverage, because he was a partner in a law firm, and the banker who was his private banker ended up being indicted and pled guilty, and now is in federal prison. Of course, I have another pending, one of his cases still pending with me. His law school roommate, Corey Fleming, pled guilty in state and federal court to stealing clients' money, and I sentenced Corey Fleming to prison. He's appealing his sentence. He also received a federal sentence. Alex negotiated a plea deal to pleading guilty to 22 of the 99 counts, and to a negotiated sentence of 27 years in prison. So I imposed the 27-year prison sentence on him for all of that. And we did a little more talking. Let's see what's on that video for a moment. It was September of 2021 when the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court assigned me to preside over the pending investigations involving. So we moved from court TV to various crime offenses that you are being investigated for, initially including these financial crimes and the murder cases. And I have lived with this case now for over 2 years, and I have 34 days left before active retirement. And after imposing this sentence, your life will continue. I will turn the page and leave you behind. You're quite an enigma. I think that's person that many of us thought we knew. Yeah, I had to give Alex one last speech. And he didn't seem to be too upset. You all have seen many pictures of him and many phases of his life, now his life behind bars. Still had outstanding this motion for a new trial based on jury tampering that was assigned to Justice Jean Toll, former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who's now 80 years old, and she's been retired a long time. So retirement in South Carolina doesn't always mean retirement. So she handled that case involving alleged jury tampering and brought all the jurors in and polled them individually and asked them whether or not they were in any way swayed by anything other than the evidence during the trial. All of them said no, except for one juror who said she wasn't, then she was, and she had some credibility issues, according to Justice Toll. So he received the 27-year sentence, and some of the people who got up just said, you lied, you cheated, you stole. Very disappointed in Alex because as a lawyer, they placed their trust in him. So just a couple of weeks ago, Justice Toll issued her order denying the motion for a new trial. She ruled from the bench immediately after hearing the testimony. And the part I like about what she said was the very last sentence. She said she reviewed the entire transcript of the case, and that Judge Newman said it best when I said that the evidence was overwhelming as to the guilt, and she denied his motion and adjourned court to his disappointment, and he is now back in the custody of the state of South Carolina. So what is for me? So, I'm retired. I'm here in, where are we? Key Biscayne, relaxing, taking it easy. And, I showed that because I said the one thing about a televised trial is that you have to be on your P's and Q's at all times. And that trial went for over a month. And for about 2 seconds, toward the end of the trial, at the end of the day, I leaned back and closed my eyes, and I could hear the camera snapping when I did that. So first I was disappointed. I said, oh, well, it's fine. I have retired. So I've now retired, except for some remnants of Alex cases and James Brown and this one and that one that I'm still dealing with. But what's next for me is speaking engagements like this, mediations. They're working through with JAMS and mediations. Had the opportunity to speak at the Harris Martin's Art of Litigation Conference in Charleston. I'm sure you all encounter some of those guys. Those are the top plaintiffs, power people in the country. Probably the lawyers that people get to handle the cases, the small firms get, the big firms get some of those guys. So it was interesting being at their conference, now being at this conference. But that's what's next for me. And other than saying thank you all, enjoyed being here. And
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. That was-
And if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
Any questions?
Who's going to play you in the movie?
Well, you know, there was a Lifetime movie that came out, and they had a Canadian guy. I was like, who is this guy? You know, they haven't asked me. They haven't checked with me on that. But maybe when it gets to the big screen, I'll have some input.
During the course of the trial, before and during and after, did you ever feel any hint of a threat to you?
You know, it's interesting. I have just felt protected throughout my judicial career. I've never felt a need to having any special security or anything. I think that probably if a polling was done, 95% of the people would probably feel that the jury got it right on this case. Of course, everybody became an expert concerning everything in this case. But so I've never felt that I needed security. But during that trial, we had 24-hour security, and there's no way that I was going to spend the night in the local town where the trial was. We had a little river house in Beaufort, away from everyone and protected by local police.
Well, you did such a thorough job, no one has any questions. Anyway, thank you, Judge. We appreciate your time, and it was wonderful to hear from you.
Thank you very much.